Welcome, searchers and seekers. We're talking about the book of Isaiah. And here is an historical fact that the Assyrians came through and destroyed many of the cities in Israel and Judah, so in the northern tribes and in the southern tribes. And we have actually some evidence from Sennacherib, who invaded Judah in 701 BCE. And this is mentioned in Kings and Isaiah. And we actually have Sennacherib in a book called Prism Writing. Hezekiah of Judah had rebelled against him. So he went in and laid siege to many cities. And it describes how he conquered the cities with ramps. So they built up ramps over the walls. They had their soldiers tunnel underneath, and they used battering rams to break down the gates. And so that was the means that they would conquer walled cities. He says he took about 200,000 prisoners of war. And what they did is they relocated many people in order to break down ethnic, tribal, national identity. So they would forcefully relocate people, mix people, so basically destroy the culture. So this is different than the genocidal wars that we saw here. The Assyrian Empire was more inclined to control populations than to destroy their enemies. They wanted to maintain the population at certain levels, and they were not interested in just expanding their people. So it's a little bit different than the genocidal war we saw among the small nations and cities who would decimate and destroy absolutely everyone in neighboring cities. So it says he took about 200,000 prisoners from Israel and Judah. So that gives you a sense. That probably makes sense. That seems to be like a historic figure. So he mentions Hezekiah, and he mentions that he sacked the many cities, but he does not claim to have breached the walls of Jerusalem. And that is something that fits with the biblical account. The biblical account said there was some sort of plague that stopped it, and then his troops went back to Assyria. Now that's fascinating. What if that plague had not occurred? Well, let's say it did. What if Sennacherib had conquered Jerusalem? That could have been an end to the Israelite tradition, but for some reason it did not occur. But this is tremendous historical validation. So about the year 700 BCE, we see that this external account verifies the biblical account. We are now in Isaiah 5, chapter 5 of the book of Isaiah. And here we have the love song about a vineyard. And there are three levels to this, and it makes sense. So you have, say, a man and his beloved, and then you have a farmer and his vineyard, and then you have Yahweh and the people of Israel. So that is this, I don't know what you could say, double or triple a metaphor. Let me sing for my beloved my love song concerning his vineyard. My beloved had a vineyard on a very fertile hill. He dug it and cleared it of all the stones, and planted it with choice vines. He built a watchtower in the midst of it, and hewed out a wine vat in it. He expected it to yield grapes, but it yielded wild grapes. And now, inhabitants of Jerusalem and people of Judah, judge between me and my vineyard. What more was there to do for my vineyard that I have not done in it? So this is in a sense of Yahweh asking this, what have I not done for the people of Israel? When I expected it to yield grapes, why did it yield wild grapes? So Yahweh here is complaining about the lack of fidelity on behalf of the people of Israel. And now I will tell you what I will do with my vineyard. I will remove its hedge, and it shall be devoured. I will break down its wall, and it will be trampled down. I will make it a waste. So you get the sense that this is the destruction occurring because of Assyria, Babylon. Verse 7, for the vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel, and the people of Judah are his pleasant planting. He expected justice, but saw bloodshed, righteousness, but heard a cry. And the Hebrew words play on each other. He expected mishpat, but got mispach. He expected tzedikah, but got se'aka. So you see the punning, the play with words there. In 5:8, we see Isaiah talking about justice. Ah, you who join house to house and add field to field until there is room for no one else. So he's talking about this idea of consolidation. And this is still a problem for us in the modern times. Consolidation of power in business. Remember, agriculture is the main source of income and wealth, and so adding field to field is a sign of this consolidation of power. In most societies, 70 to 90% of the people are farmers or shepherds growing food. And then in modern times, it takes fewer and fewer people till it only takes maybe 3% of the population to grow all the food. Of course, that 3% also needs to have machinery built and energy for those machines, so it's not quite just 2 or 3%. But here, this is the problem of consolidation and the consolidation of wealth and power that he is noticing. The Lord of hosts has sworn in my hearing, surely many houses shall be desolate, large and beautiful houses without inhabitant. So this is Isaiah has just such great literature, the way he's describing this. Yes, a lot of these houses shall be desolate and probably already are. So he's talking about things that already happened in Israel, I would say, that there have been destruction of these houses that have conglomerated power. Lord of hosts, again, this idea, Yahweh of hosts, Yahweh who has this divine court and or armies. In heaven, he sits on a throne. He has seraphim and others. So Lord of hosts, not just this singular invisible God, but this God in heaven with other angelic beings. Ah, you who rise early in the morning in pursuit of strong drink, and linger in the evening to be inflamed by wine, whose feasts consist of lyre and harp, tambourine and flute and wine, but who do not regard the deeds of Yahweh or see the work of his hands. So here he's talking about hedonism, the pursuit of pleasure, drugs, music, and we see this as a universal theme today, the idea of people who just drink a lot of alcohol, listen to music, do drugs, and don't attend to their spiritual needs. And so this is a problem for society and a cause of why they will go into exile. Therefore, my people go into exile without knowledge. Or you could read, because of a lack of knowledge. So they go into exile because they lacked knowledge. Their nobles are dying of hunger, and their multitude is parched with thirst. Again, the doublet idea, the two ideas together, hunger, thirst, this doublet idea in prophetic utterance and poetry in Hebrew. In 5:14, therefore Sheol has enlarged its appetite and opened its mouth beyond all measure. The nobility of Jerusalem and her multitude go down. So Sheol is this underworld, so it's sort of described as this gaping mouth that takes in the inhabitants of Jerusalem. So you could say, like, that's a much more interesting way of just saying, oh, all the people are condemned to hell or go to hell. This is very poetic, even in how he describes Sheol. Isaiah's language here is so metaphorical, poetic, interesting. Just as literature, he is just great. Verse 18, chapter 5. Ah, you who drag iniquity along with cords of falsehood, who drag sin along as with cart ropes. So this idea of not just you're a bunch of sinners, but you drag sin along as it like this cart behind you. Uh, what a metaphor! And he just continues, who say, let Yahweh make haste. Let him speed his work that we may see it. Let the plan of the Holy One of Israel hasten to fulfillment that we may know it. So why is he saying that? Hurry up, like we want God to hurry up. The idea is that they're not seeing it. So they're scoffing at it. They're saying, we're not seeing the judgment of the Holy One of Israel, one of his main phrases for Yahweh. They're scoffers, they're disbelievers. They're saying Yahweh really isn't doing anything. And then next, in verse 20, you who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. And you have to pause and try to think about what is he talking about. And it's moral relativism that we talk about in modern times. And this is just a beautiful definition of it. People who call evil good and good evil. People say, there's no real difference between good or evil. It's just a matter of personal preference. There's no actual good in the world. There's no actual evil in the universe. It's just a matter of human convention. So he's had the scoffers and the moral relativists. And he continues, you who are wise in your own eyes and shrewd in your own sight. You who are heroes in drinking wine and valiant at mixing drink, who acquit the guilty for a bribe and deprive the innocent of their rights. So he's talking here about many things. You who are wise in your own eyes. So he's talking about arrogance and hubris and people who think that they are so smart. And they acquit the guilty for a bribe. So this is bribery, which we understand, and deprive the innocent of their rights. So he's really tied together all these moral categories. So this is expressed in a sort of very metaphorical, basic, clear ways. But it's the same sort of philosophical ideas that we deal with. Disbelief, moral relativism, arrogance, bribery. So these are the social problems, the social contagion of the age that is it's what is causing this day of judgment, this day of rectification. So he is here developing the religion into more of an astute, moral, ethical religion in which people are accountable for their behaviors. And in verse 24 and following, so even the punishment for this will be expressed in these wonderful metaphors, these using physical attributes of the world to show what judgment will be. And he uses fire and grass in this case. Therefore, as the tongue of fire devours the stubble, so the stubble of grass. So even tongue of fire is a metaphor. And as the dry grass sinks down in the flame. I love that image. As the grass burns, it slowly falls down. So really, this beautiful extended metaphor. For they have rejected the instruction of the Lord of hosts. The instruction, and the word here is Torah, the religious instruction, the teaching of the Lord, and have despised the word of the Holy One of Israel. So he ends with his preferred epithets or names or phrases for God, the Lord of hosts and the Holy One of Israel. In 5:25, Isaiah mentions that God, Yahweh, is responding because of his anger. So anger is a part of it. So that is in keeping with the tradition so far. They're not afraid to attribute human emotions to Yahweh. So that's an anthropomorphism. In many ways, the modern conception of God is someone who is subsumed with emotions of love and kindness and compassion. And we don't like to attribute the emotions of anger and displeasure to God. Um, and I'm just sort of thinking and wondering now, is that really adequate? We don't like to think of God as angry at specific things, but yet we attribute human emotions, the higher emotions, to God, like love, compassion. But is there really justification for that? Because why can't God be angry in a way? Why can't we attribute those emotions to him? Because we have them. It's okay for us to have them. In any case, perhaps they are overdone. And we've seen many cases of that in the Hebrew Scriptures. God gets too angry, lashes out, kills people for minor infractions. So definitely that's problematic. Well, what's the result going to be? So Assyria is perched to invade and may have already invaded. So Isaiah may be talking about something that has already occurred and trying to explain it theologically. He will raise a signal for a nation far away. So there will be a sign somehow, and a whistle for a people at the ends of the earth. So there's a whistle calling Assyria. There's this sign put up. Again, the doublet, the two ideas. Here they come, swiftly, speedily. None of them is weary, none stumbles. So this army is very powerful. And then look how he explains that. I mean, he could just say, this army is very strong and swift, but just the way he describes it, very poetic, very great literature. None of them is weary, none stumbles, none slumbers or sleeps. Not a loincloth is loose, not a sandal thong broken. Their arrows are sharp, their bows are bent. Their horse hoofs seem like flint, and their wheels like a whirlwind. So the wheels of the chariot like a whirlwind, like a tornado. Their roaring is like a lion, like young lions they roar. They growl and seize their prey, they carry it off, and no one can rescue. They will roar over it on that day of judgment, like the roaring of the sea. So you have the roaring of the lions, now it's the roaring of the sea. And if one look to the land, only darkness and distress, and the light grows dark with clouds. So a very amazing prophetic utterance about the day of judgment coming for all the reasons Isaiah has listed in these earlier sections of chapter 5. In chapter 6, we have a famous and amazing portrait of divinity. Here we have a theophany, a revelation of God, a manifestation of the divine. And there are many of these in many religions, and the word theophany describes them, a manifestation of the divine. So in the year King Uzziah died, so about 738 BCE, I saw Yahweh sitting on a throne, and the hem of his robe filled the temple. So it's this throne that's high and lofty. It's in heaven. Yahweh is so massive that the hem of his garment just fills the whole temple almost. If he's so massive, the temple can't contain him. Seraphs were in attendance above him. And this is how Isaiah describes the seraphim. They were in attendance above him. Each had 6 wings. With 2 they covered their faces, with 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they flew. And one called to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. So what are these seraphim? Seraph means something like serpent, and the idea is that it could be similar to the cobra on the Pharaoh's head. This is sort of a serpent, cobra, dangerous animal, so dangerous to others, but protective of Yahweh. They had wings to cover their eyes, so they would not die seeing the presence of the Lord. They covered their feet, and they flew with the 2 others. And this is a unique description of Yahweh in the Hebrew Scripture. So this is not generally how other people viewed the throne. Now, the Hebrew Scriptures has this very aniconic, this anti-idol, and tries to make Yahweh um, not visible. You can't make any representation of Yahweh in art. You can't really form an image of God. Now, that seems to be a great idea in some ways, but we do have all these images of God. God is seen as a man, as a male human being. And so, on the one hand, you can't make an image, but these are, in a sense, verbal visual images of the divine. So, there are the seraphim, these protective agents within this whole divine council up in heaven. So God is not alone in the sense of the modern understanding of an invisible, non-physical being. God is really perceived in some literal sense as looking like this. Now they say, holy, holy, holy. And this phrase has become very famous for Jewish prayer and Christian prayer, because if the seraphim are saying this to one another, that would seem to say that that's what should characterize human worship. And we are taken back to this idea of when you see God, you will die. He has seen the Lord of hosts. He's a man of unclean lips, from a people of unclean lips. And so one of the seraphim, so the plural in Hebrew is seraphim, in English it's seraphs. So one of them touches his lips with a burning coal, and he is purified. And they have found that there was, not in the Hebrew Scriptures, but in Mesopotamian religion, there was a practice of the purification of lips. The seraphim were used in the area north of Judea, Syria, Phoenicia, that area. They were used associated with the throne. And seraph literally means a burning one, so it's very appropriate that they use the burning coals. So they're associated with thrones. The seraphim say, holy, holy, holy. And this account was not used by early Christianity to apply to the Trinity, because the idea of the Trinity was not formulated until much later. So this would seem to have been something that they could have used right away, but did not until a couple centuries later after Christ. In chapter 7, we read an account of the Syro-Ephraimite War. So Ephraim is one of the 10 tribes, and it's now one of the most powerful. So these two, the people of the Damascus, Syria area, and the 10 tribes, are trying to develop an alliance with countries to fight Assyria, and they want Judea to join them, but Judea is in this bind, because if they join up with Syria and the Ephraimites, then if Assyria conquers them, it will be bad for them. So it turns out that Judea does not, and then they have to fight Syria and Ephraim, so it's sort of a civil war. Judea is able to withstand. In Kings, 2 Kings, it is told that Judea gives a bounty to Assyria, claims allegiance to Assyria, and Assyria ends up destroying the 10 tribes. So the Syro-Ephraimite War is from 735 to 732 BCE, and this appears very much an historical fact. And soon the northern tribes, Samaria, Israel, in the sense of the northern tribes, will be conquered by Assyria. But right now, Jerusalem is under threat from these two nations. So Isaiah is trying to calm Ahaz down. So here's how the situation unfolds in 7:10. And the Lord and Yahweh spoke to Ahaz, saying, Ask a sign of Yahweh your God, be it as deep as Sheol or as high as heaven. But Ahaz said, I will not ask, and I will not put Yahweh to the test. Then Isaiah said, Hear then, O house of David. Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Yahweh will give you a sign. Look, the young woman is with child, and shall bear a son, and shall name him Emmanuel. He shall eat curds and honey by the time he knows how to refuse the good, how to refuse the evil and choose the good. So once he is able to tell what is good to eat, when he is able to know the difference between right or wrong. So say 3 years old, 4 years old, a few years old. For before the child knows how to refuse the evil and choose the good, the land before whose two kings you are in dread will be deserted. The Lord will bring on you and your people, etc. So the idea is that this child will be born, and by the time it's a few years old, this situation will be over. Now, did he write this before the events or after the events? So I think with Isaiah, my personal take is that he is writing shortly after the events. And so it's not so much prophecy of the future, but history of the past. Also, later on in this account, he will develop another sign with another child. So this is not just one instance. Now, the young woman is with child. So the young woman is really not identified. And the Hebrew word just means a young woman. And Alma is that Hebrew word. Alma does not mean virgin, it means a young woman. And when it was translated into the Septuagint, or the Greek version, the Greek translation of the Hebrew in about 280 BCE, they used the Greek word parthenos, which does have much more of a connotation of virgin. But in the original Hebrew, it just means a young girl is going to have a baby, and then a few years later it will be able to know the difference between good and evil, and by then the northern attackers will be decimated by Assyria. As any parent knows, it's difficult to teach a baby, an infant, what to eat, what not to put in its mouth. So this idea of choosing good and evil is the idea of before a child can figure out what is something that is safe to eat and what is not. But even 300 BCE, when the word parthenos or virgin is used, it's not saying that the virgin will miraculously get pregnant. It could say that this person who is a virgin, who is not pregnant now, will get pregnant and have a baby, and the rest of the story. So this is really not a story of virgin birth at all. It has its own explanation in situ in the situation in which we see the Syro-Ephraimite War. And we don't know who this Alma or young girl is. She's not identified. Later on, another child will be born to the prophetess, the wife of Isaiah. And who is this Alma? Who is this young woman? Well, the text doesn't say. It's not clear. Later on in the text, Isaiah will have a child with his wife, and so in that sense we know she's called the prophetess, but here we don't know. And she shall bear a son and shall name him Emmanuel. It says Emmanuel, God is with us. El is that God word that is used in many compound words. So Emmanuel, God is with us. And that is true literally for Judah, for Jerusalem, because God is thought of as literally residing in the temple in Jerusalem. And in chapter 8, we have a similar story. And Isaiah went to the prophetess, and she conceived and bore a son. And then Yahweh said to me, name him Mahir Shalal Hashbaz, which means the spoil speeds. the prey hastens. So the sense of spoiling, the prey is fleeing away. So these would be these northern enemies. For before the child knows how to call my mother or my father. So before the child is able to speak and say mama, dada, the wealth of Damascus and the spoil of Samaria will be carried away by the king of Assyria. So Damascus and Samaria will be destroyed. And so that is the context of this very famous story of the virgin bearing a child that shall be named Emmanuel.